Alright, welcome guys and gals. It's that time again where we actually do a tier list. The last one has been a little bit ago. I think it was the AMP tier list. Today I want to look at all the weeklies that we had and we will have, and I want to rank them here with like top tier stuff that was like really nice, very decent, which obviously is very decent, self-explanatory, needs fine-tuning, weeklies that had really good potential overall, but I think they were falling short in some instances, and please rework a few weeklies that unfortunately were pure garbage, and I will also give some suggestions how you can make them better and be more impactful overall. But yeah, you will be thinking to yourself, wait, we are currently here. Why are you ranking this already? Because we haven't been here and here yet. These two have already been present in the past in the first version of Program X Season 1. I wanted to say Program 1, but now Program X Season 1. That way around. We had Thieves Loadout, Kill the Snitch, and Naked and Afraid Root Canal way back when. So we already know what this is. Also, according to leaks, these variators have not changed, so I think I'm fair to judge it on how I experienced it back then, these variators, and you know, give my opinion on them, because there's nothing else added to them in this specific weekly, except obviously you have multiple trials now instead of only one way back when. But yeah, also keep in mind, obviously I'm a 600 hour plus Andy, so my opinion might be different to some other folks out there, but yeah. Let's start off with Geister, which I will be, for being fair, I will not rate Geister according to the horrible grind it had. If you played it, you know it. The grind was horrible. It was absolutely atrocious, grindy, and everyone... It was so funny though, because the entire community sat down and learned to speedrun Sabotage the Lockdown, like, together, and it also had something wholesome in it. But yeah, the grind was really garbage. But let's talk instead about what it actually added. It was a lot of gimmicks. It was the Skinnerman appearing every time, pretty much. The jump scares of it, that is. No player names, more imposters, and ranged enemies. And ranged enemies was actually really nice, to have enemies be more aware, and the lunges are more, like, the lunges are longer, and so on and so forth. That I really liked overall. But other than that, I will put it here. But it needs fine tuning, because yes, this is only meant to be gimmicks, and I think it can stay as it being gimmicks, but having most of the components being locked behind multiplayer, first of all, and second, a lot of the scares were already familiar, so like there was nothing new added. It would have been cool if you saw some fake enemies, for example, once in a while, or some other wild shit, you know? Some more scares, because it was basically Skinnerman mechanic recycled, unfortunately. And again, as I said, and this will be a theme by the way, I personally am a person that is obviously a massive solo player. I play 95% of the game solo most of the times. Very rarely I play with other people, mostly only when I'm forced to, with something like Omega and stuff like that. So, while I'm not saying you shouldn't do stuff that is restricted to multiplayer, I personally prefer if you can experience that content somehow also in single player. For example, what they could have done, for example, is, I don't know, I know it destroys the purpose of them a little bit, but imposters in single player would have been an idea, and then you would have to hide, or, you know, like use hiding spots or hit them with stuff, something like that. But yeah, unfortunately, I have to put it here. Same with Be Quiet. Now, Be Quiet got a lot of hate. I'm gonna put it above Geister. Be Quiet had some good stuff and good ideas, but they weren't executed that well. it had the unique mechanic of voice chat, like enemies can hear you talk, which a lot of horror games adopt. This had two problems though. First problem, again, it did not work in single player. I wanted to really go on out with this mechanic and maybe stream it even and have this funny moment where, okay, there's an enemy nearby, I actually have to shut the fuck up. Like, you will be like, wait, why would you need a mic setting in a single player mechanic? There are a lot of horror games out there that do that really well, and it's really exciting for something like streamers. For example, Welcome to the Game 2, the deep web browsing game, has segments where you go in the closet and you have to hide from a hitman, and you have a microphone attached to the hiding, and if you make a sound he will find you, stuff like that. So it creates a bit of tension. Or I think, don't quote me on that, but I think on console Alien Isolation also has a mic setting, like on PlayStation I think, but I'm not so sure about that. There are a lot of games that have these sorts of mechanics, and what I really want them to do is at least allow mic setting in single player. But the other problem that I also mentioned, because I mentioned there are two problems with that, is they were also pretty dumb, the enemies. From what I've seen, I haven't played with other people, so I couldn't test it out myself. But from what I've seen, they were also pretty dumb. And they would hear stuff, like they would hear you talk, but they couldn't really follow along. So that was kinda... Now, the saving grace of this was, for one, it had supporting variators. Like, I think it had barricaded doors and stuff. And, you know, that noise, like noise stuff to accompany it for, which makes sense because the whole gimmick was be quiet, like also more sound traps, more glass, and so on and so forth. And it also had the variator that all actions made more noise, and that one was actually really interesting to me because, for example, I had scenarios way back in my Be Quiet Weekly video, which was the first video of the series, where I had, I think it was a generator in Chapel, I think it was both Chapel and Police Station actually, where an enemy actually heard me do the buttons, because the buttons actually did 2 noise bars instead of only 1. And you know, little stuff like that, I appreciate that really a lot. And I think if you build on their foundation, you can make this really, really decent. But I still think it needs a lot of work. Fix the voice chat thing, maybe add something else to the mechanic. But yeah, I don't think it's hot garbage like other people thought, but yeah, it definitely needs some work. What is not hot garbage is sharp glass. I will put it in very decent. Up until recently, it was pretty much my favorite weekly because this embodies what, in my opinion, weeklies should be like. Sharp glass, you had more glass, obviously, on the ground, and glass actually damages you. This changes gameplay fundamentally. All of a sudden you cannot run slippers and just walk over every glass patch and never trigger sound traps for like the sound trap thingy in the final, like, I can't think of the word, you know what I mean, like in the report, there we go, report. You actually get damaged if you no step on it, even if you have slippers. So that's actually game changing. And in general, it wasn't too much, but it changed the game quite a lot actually. Because one of the trials that was, for example, featured was Vindicate the Guilty. And in Vindicate the Guilty, if you don't want to get damaged in the entire run, you have to do the acid segment really carefully. And a lot of the times you had situations where there is a vault and sharp glass right next to it. Normally you would be like, okay, maybe I tank the sharp glass, make a little bit of noise. With this, you actually have to find it all the way around it. So it really changes up a lot. And yeah, that's pretty much all about sharp glass. I really liked it because it was really unique. And I hope, now we will go through a bunch of them, but I hope that moving forward, when they invent new weeklies and stuff, it will be more on the level of this, because yes, it wasn't really difficult, yada yada yada, but it was unique and it brought something new to the table, which, you know, some other weeklies didn't do. I vented on no second chances in my no second chances video. The problem with that weekly was simply, you have this threat, right? A variator, where there's no syringes, no respawn pills, no respawns. If you die, you're dead. And it sounds really exciting, until you realize there are no other really variators in the trials. There are no item limitations, there are no, you know, large enemy variators, there's no unreliable doors, there is no rig restrictions or other loadout restrictions, there's nothing. I made the Dark Souls comparison back in that video, and it is just true. It's literally the same as if you're fighting a boss in a Dark Souls game and he has a really devastating attack, but he has like a 2% chance to ever launch that attack, so you never even see it. Like, the way you really want to do a weekly like this is you need other variators attached to it. Like they did with Be Quiet. With Be Quiet they did, you know, more sound traps and more barricaded doors, so the other variator of, you know, actions emitting more sound did more. With Sharp Glass, they knew, okay, with Sharp Glass doing damage, we need more Sharp Glass, so they added a variator to put more Sharp Glass in the trials. With this, they added nothing, and that's why it simply fell flat. I never felt that at all. And you might be like, yeah, but if you're a new player, then it's really different. No, I don't think it is, unless you are really struggling. If you're a new player, you should be more stealthy anyways, but the only other variator besides this was increased threat. Like the base variator, so it's not the default trial enemy-wise. So I don't know, some base enemy does like 1 bar of damage. Prime Asset did like 2 bars of damage, which is very generous. Like, there was just nothing attached to it, and that's why it was a downfall. Stick Together. I actually never featured this weekly on the channel because I just played it off stream in like an off stream session. Someone messaged me and was like, yeah, you wanna try to A+ it? And I was like, yeah, sure, let's try it. And we had a good time. We ran through that pretty well, and without him I probably would have skipped it, because again, it has the same problem that, you know, it's multiplayer only. That being said though, I will put it up in very decent, probably on the lower end because it's multiplayer exclusive, but this weekly made me appreciate Omega a lot more. I will talk about Omega at the very end of the video, but long story short, what this gimmick was all about is the whole thing about you are together in a group, and if you split up, you both take damage. It is really rough, but the fact there was only increased threat attached to it made it very bearable, and honestly, a fine challenge. Now, I would still love for them to improve the system a little bit. For example, I would love them that if you go out of range of your teammates, that you get a little bit of a small warning before you start taking damage, like, I don't know, a 1 or 2 second sound cue that basically tells you you're going apart, you should stay more together, because sometimes it was like really on the edge and then immediately taking damage felt kinda bad. And I would also want the restriction for that being lifted if you're like the only person alive, because there were scenarios, that was back with Omega especially, where let's say you were a duo and one of you dies, and the other person does, like, no one has a syringe, the trial fails right on the spot, because if you want to get to a syringe, the tracker that shocks you, or whatever the lore behind this is still working. So if you want to get a syringe, you will just die from shock damage, unless you know the syringe is like in range. But even then, you still take unnecessary damage, which shouldn't be a thing with this mechanic. But yeah, I mean, I would probably put it down here, but at the same time, it adds an interesting mechanic that I can appreciate for what it is. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of multiplayer exclusive stuff, but it was really fine, honestly. And I had a really good time, surprisingly, with it, trying to A+ it. Now let's go to the big one. Winter Kills. This was top tier, and pretty much the entire community agrees on this. Let me explain why. Okay, it had the thing with the present gimmick. Let's be real, it was a reskin of the posters. Still really cool to do a second objective for once. Like a secondary second objective. Okay, this is completely butchered. But yeah, was really cool. Also on Orphanage you had multiple secret rooms, which was also pretty cool. Unfortunately you cannot stack booster items together, so that kind of fell flat. But it was cool for multiplayer, I guess. If you wanted to have multiple people having the large battery or the syringe or whatever, it was pretty cool. But the main kicker was the freezing mechanic, that every 2 minutes you would hear a warning that the trial is about to freeze and you need to get to a hiding spot. Hiding spots is currently a mechanic that is really underutilized in trials. Like, most of the times, as someone who plays this game a shitload, I barely even use them. Like, there's no real reason to. If I want to hide, I just hide in the dark, crouched in like a corner or something instead. With this, you're actually forced to use hiding spot, and similar to sharp glass, it adds a unique dynamic. And honestly, like, the reason why this is up here is because there's nothing bad to say about this mechanic, in my opinion. I really would want to see this return in some capacity. I know they will probably might not, because it's the whole freezing theme, but if they can do a similar theme with like gas, let's pretend, like it's getting gassed and you need to find hiding spots and something like that, I would be down for it, because it was a really, really unique mechanic, and I just want to see it return. I legitimately miss playing Winter Kills. It was also a huge reason why I played Winter Kills a lot and even did like a large speedrun on it, even though I had all the rewards unlocked. It was just so fun, the entire thing. Now let's talk about Nomads. This goes even further down. How do I say this? This had nothing to offer. In general, stuff where it just takes one category of items away or stuff like that, it's just really trash. Like, this also only had increased threat as another variator. And yeah, you can now make the argument, yeah, veteran players obviously don't get hit in the first place or don't get psychosis and whatnot, so they will not get hit by this. But newer players will. You can simply run heal rig. There's nothing stopping you from running the heal rig. Not a fucking thing. If you are struggling with that, literally run a healing rig. And yeah, there's just nothing to say, because there is just nothing with this. Has the same issue like this. If there was some more stuff attached to it, like increased threat, deadly prime asset and whatnot, then yeah, okay, fine, but yeah. Bad Trip was really nice to build a contrast. Bad Trip was around that range right here, in my opinion. It borrowed a similar thing of Geister, where you kind of were in permapsychosis. However, it expanded upon it way better, because you were permanently one psycho short, which meant that the psychosis mines, for example, would also always one-shot your psychosis right off the get-go, which made them a little bit more threatening. Now, they're not the most threatening thing in the game right now, and honestly, one of the big problems of Bad Trip was that the psychosis mechanic is right now just more abusable rather than anything. But leaving that out, it was a really good weekly. Again, psychosis is a mechanic that's a bit all over the place right now. I hope they change something about it, that it's not that abusable anymore. But what it tried to do, it was really nice in my opinion. And made the whole madness thing a lot better than Geister. Also, I can appreciate, I was really 50-50 on how I would think about it when I played it for the first time. But the Lost Sanity 1 negative mark on the report that you get immediately was also a unique gameplay aspect that is a bit underrated, because that meant if you wanted to get A+ in any of these trials, you would not only need to get the posters, but also you would actually need to do more positive actions to even out your grade. So, you know, use more items, throw more bottles, bricks, whatnot, use your rig more. And I can appreciate that a lot. It's a small thing, but it is a nice thing regardless, in my opinion. Oh boy. You see what I see? Hardcore, which is very controversial, and I mean, I can only add to that. Will I put it here though, or here? I will be harsh. I need to be harsh. So let's say the devs are watching this video, that they know, okay, we need to work on that. Or at least take my feedback into account if they want to. Hardcore was a failure. It focused too much on the enemies themselves. Yes, the more damaging traps from time to time was a really cool gimmick. But, I mean, to be fair, also Deadly Prime Asset was also just bugged straight up, so the weekly wasn't even partially working. But the main problem was it focused too much on enemies. There were no loadout restrictions, there was no unreliable doors, which would have actually been intimidating probably. There was no limited items, like you had bricks and bottles and all that stuff en masse, so you could deal with the enemies. Like, I don't want to say it was false advertising, but it was literally easier than Program X. I beat Hardcore on my level 1 account during the level 1 challenge, and unironically, that felt easier than when I was doing the exams. You know, the last mission of every main program, like Program 1, Exam Killer, Snitch, and so on and so forth. They felt harder than Hardcore while I was playing and doing the level 1 challenge way back when. Again, because unreliable doors, for example, was such a huge obstacle in the level 1 challenge, and stuff like that is just simply missing. Now, talking about how I would change it, throw everything out of the window. Maybe only increase threat, but invent a new variator where every bit of damage kills you. And you will be like, holy, that sounds insane. But yeah, that's the point of Hardcore. And if the point of the weeklies is to test out stuff and maybe get new variators and stuff into the game, then they should test out stuff like that. Again, just do this Hardcore variator, add increased threat, and just see how the average player does when every single thing, like every enemy, every trap, and so on and so forth, one-shots. Just see how they do. Not even add unreliable doors or limited items or any rig restrictions or stuff like that. Literally just the one-shot thing and just see how people do. But yeah, that's how I would change it. But yeah, a lot of people got pissed off by that. I personally did not get really pissy at that, but yeah, it was pretty trash, I won't lie. Same with no wigs, which is gonna be a bit controversial. I'm gonna put it right next to it, right there. And a lot of people, especially on the Outlast Trials Discord server, I saw that a lot, they actually praised the weekly. No wigs was actually pretty good in their eyes. And obviously my perspective of it is, I play a lot without loadouts. Not even in the challenges, like I do a lot of speed runs that are, you know, A+, no damage, no loadout, no bitches, you know, through all the trials, to A, to like Alpha, Omega, whatever the fuck. So yeah, I'm someone who doesn't really use rigs or amps or anything like that. Hell, I haven't ever even used amps really. I only started using amps like noise reduction and so on and so forth for specific speedruns that required it. Even in casual play I never use noise reduction and stuff like that because it's just too strong for my liking, you know. And that's fine. And if people then go, oh my god, this was actually really decent, it actually forced me to not use a rig, that's actually really cool. And honestly, it's also cool that a lot of people after the weekly went, maybe I should play normally and not use my rig. And that's really cool. But the problem to me comes that for me, running no loadout versus running a loadout is already a difficulty setting that you can do yourself. And with a lot of these weeklies that we've already talked about, the problem was, like for something, let's say Sharp Glass or Bad Trip, I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, this is so fucking easy, what are these trash developers doing, blah 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 blah. And they ran the strongest busted loadout every single time. So it gives me a bit of a sour taste in my mouth that now this is getting praised, which you can literally do yourself as a thing. Again, mind you, this added nothing else that weekly. It's just no rigs. Again, only increased threat. There was no increased threat 2, there was no deadly prime asset, there was no unreliable doors, there was nothing. This weekly was literally a quote-unquote difficulty setting that you can already do in the game. Like, it didn't really add anything, and it got more credit than it deserved, in my humble opinion. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about that down there, but it just rubs me the wrong way for some reason when people say this was a masterful weekly, when in my opinion you can already play the game like that. And people don't play the game like that and then complain that, oh my god, this is easy, oh my god, this is easy, oh my god, that is easy, blah 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 blah. It just doesn't feel good to me. Enough of the negativity though, we're talking about back to square one, which is top tier, which you will be like, oh my god, you're only putting that in top tier because it's actually difficult, blah 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 blah. Listen, this actually fundamentally changed the game. Yes, it's only the main trials. Yes, you also only have like increased enemy count. Like there was no unreliable doors and stuff like that. But it actually changed the game a lot. Not for new players, funnily enough, but for veteran players. I think a lot of people were shocked when the prescriptions level 2 and 3 got taken away from them. I already had the pleasure with that, with the previously mentioned level 1 challenge. Like 1 week before Back to Square One came out, I did the level 1 challenge, so I already knew what it was like to not have unlimited stamina and all that stuff, and having to bash things in with 3 hits, actually having to worry about night vision, heavy objects being a pain, only having 3 inventory slots, blah 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 blah. I already got accustomed to that, but it was a shock for a lot of people, and it's justified that it's a shock. You are literally playing a different game with all these prescriptions versus without these prescriptions. Also, it added the variator no amps, which I think for a lot of people, for the first time, in hundreds of hours they actually played without strong arms and noise reduction. Just throwing that out there. So that was probably also a bit of a shock how busted noise reduction is in the game. And you are allowed to run rigs, but they are not upgraded, which is really nice for the whole theme, which also this weekly also just nails. Like, and they could have said, yeah, you're not allowed to run a rig, but they made it more thematic. Yes, you can run a rig, but you are still a new player, so you haven't upgraded it yet. It also has this really cool theme about it. And yeah, overall, you're just playing a whole different game with it. And it raised the discussion that we should make it so... I lost my train of thought. That prescription should be able to be enabled and disabled and so on and so forth, which are really great discussions to have, which we should have really soon, in my opinion, with full release. So yeah, good stuff overall, good stuff. And now we come to the weekly that we currently have. This weekly is nothing. Most items in locked containers are recovery items. Yes, if you're a new player and you're still relying on batteries for night vision, or you need heals and so on and so forth, yeah, then it might be an obstacle and you have to get lockpicks and, you know, lock the containers and so on and so forth. But it was literally, that variator is literally, it's just there. It doesn't interfere with my gameplay at all, in no way, shape or form. You could argue Nomads did it too, but let's pretend I would get hit at some point. And yeah, obviously, Nomads would, you know, hinder me. No second chances. I could have died, technically, if I was really sloppy. It would have been hard, because nothing one-shots you, but it could have happened. With this, there's nothing. Like, for me, there's nothing there. The only reason you would do that is maybe for weak recharges and adrenalines, then I guess, if you want to make some plays here around there. But this is just nothing. This is literally nothing. And the only way to fix this is make the container and lockpick mechanic more appealing. Like, I don't know, invent doors that you have to lockpick. And make that a variator adjacent towards it. Or invent a new type of container which contains bricks and bottles. If you do shit like that, then yeah, this mechanic becomes a lot more appealing in the games. But like that, no, it just doesn't. It just simply doesn't. And it's just sad. Okay. Let's talk about future stuff, Naked and Afraid. We had Naked and Afraid root canal, and it was probably back then the toughest thing in Trials. I mean, afterwards, Omega really quickly became a thing, so not for long, but Naked and Afraid is a variator that a lot of people bring up for difficulties and shit. My honest opinion, I think it's a bit overrated. Like, yes, you have no items to work with, and no rigs and so on and so forth. But if you know to kite and whatnot, and you only have increased threat 1, as you do, like it's only Naked and Afraid, and increased threat 1 as variators, this is manageable if you know what you're doing, and if you know where the levels are. This does not take away, however, from players that are less experienced that will be lost and, you know, will suffer under this. And there's... Of course I'm gonna put it, like, in this range. Like, this is also the type of variator that should be more common, that actively changes the game. Like, you see the theme here around the top tier ones. It changes the flow of the game by basically throwing you into the fray with 0 items, except like the big battery, big health thing, and the antidote, and, you know, no rigs. This changes the game by making Sharp Glass actually taking damage, and changes a core mechanic of the Trials. This changes the game. by denying you a shitload of vital upgrades. This changes the game with the hiding spot thing. Like, there's a theme here with the higher ones. And obviously Naked Unafraid deserves to be up here. I'm really interested to see how this will play out, like, in a week from now, when it comes to live. I'm assuming it's the 4 main trials, and yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see some segments without any items. For example, I can imagine Snitch Garage will be pain with Blind Guy, where you have to push the thing up, and then you have to run at a spot to get the Blind Guy away, and then you have to commit to the push up. It's gonna be tricky, but nothing we will be able to not handle, and once that comes out, I will probably do a speedrun on all these trials again. Watch me. Now, Thief's Loadout is it's weird. Thief's Loadout, I'm gonna put it... I'm gonna put it here. It's really on the edge between very decent and needs fine-tuning. I vented earlier that Vaulted was pretty bad, and Thief's Loadout is kind of the same thing. But I like the theme of it and what it wants to do. Again, if they add new container types that, you know, have utility items like bricks and balls, if they add doors that you have to lockpick and stuff like that, that will help it out a ton. But I like the theme that it wants to limit your inventory space, and you know, you start with 2 lockpicks, which is also really thematic, and your rig cooldown is longer. The problem with the limited inventory is that with the prescription in level 2, where you get 1 more inventory slot, you basically outplay this. Like, you basically completely outplay this. Normally, it wants you to have 2 inventory slots, but once you get the prescription, you have 3 inventory slots, and I think with 3 inventory slots, you're fine-ish. Unless you're in a trial like Vindicate the Guilty with the microwave, then maybe it's not fine again, but... What I would love for this thing to do as well is, instead of taking away 1 inventory slot, limit the inventory to 2 slots, period. And it cannot be adjusted with, you know, any, like with the prescription level 2 for the inventory slot. I think that would make it a lot better for what it wants to do. But yeah, I have kind of a soft heart for this, because I really like the theme and the gimmick behind it, but it needs some help to make it somewhat of a threat. And now, last but not least, I'm gonna talk about Omega a little bit. Omega was really infamous because it was probably the hardest thing Trials have ever done. It was the stick together shit, like you have to stick together with your team, but with Deadly Prime Asset, which to be fair was already bugged way back when, increased threat 2, more traps, I think also unreliable doors, and no healing items. It also had the Nomads thing built into Omega. And there were some later levels in Omega where you also had no rigs, and that was a massacre. And long story short, I think I'm gonna place it here. It needs some fine-tuning, because I think that was too extreme way back when. We will get Omega back, by the way. It already got leaked alongside some other things that we will see an adjusted version of it that is more fine-tuned and isn't that extreme coming back, with like a bit more generous variators. It will come back, but at the same time, like, Omega is so weird, because a bunch of times I played Omega and I literally got fucked with, you know, teams, whether it be randoms or friends and whatnot. On my account, I have 24 failed trials on record, and all of these are Omega. Literally, it was a massacre. But I also remember Kill Snitch no rig version of Omega was one of the most intense experiences I have ever had in trials. Like, we literally, like, we were a 4 team, and I literally had to be quote unquote the hero and be like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna sacrifice myself so the rest of the team gets out. You know, these heroic moments where, you know, leave me, I'm gonna do the thing. I actually had one of these moments, and that match like went on for almost an hour, and it was one of the best, like arguably best experiences I've ever had in Trials so far. And nothing, like no weekly, no event, no program X could ever come close to it. So I think it's fair to place it like around this range. But I do think it needs some fine tuning of sorts, because I do think that Omega way back when was a little bit extreme. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you are excited for weeklies, if you want to see some of them return. What you think about my placement, what you agree with, what you disagree with, and let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, if you enjoy, make sure to drop a like and subscribe for more Outlast Trials content in the near future. And yeah, have a great rest of your day and take care everyone. Bye bye.